Happy Monday. How's it going?
Happy Monday.
Happy
Doing great.
Monday.
No better way to start it off.
TGIM. Yeah. So cool. So today on the Monday Morning Data Chat, we have Armon and Satish. For people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro, maybe starting with Armon?
Yeah, definitely. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Coalesce. And here's my co-founder here as well.
Hey guys, I'm Satish Jayanthi. I'm the other co-founder here, to talk about data.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. Welcome to the show. Been looking forward to having you guys. So walk us through real quick. I mean, what exactly is Coalesce?
Yeah,
What are you doing?
Coalesce, the problem that we're focused on solving is largely in where we saw was the biggest bottleneck in analytics today, where we've seen automation really impact pretty much every sector of analytics. If you think of getting access to data from sources, things like Fivetran have made it so easy to point and click. Same thing has happened on the front end tools with things like Tableau for BI or Data Robot for data science. We're applying that same philosophy to actually transforming that data, taking it from its raw format to the point where it's actually consumable for those upstream drive insight out of data type tools.
That's really interesting. I mean, what are some of the shortcomings that you're seeing in the transformation space right now?
There's quite a bit. I would say that, one thing that we're seeing is an exponential growth in data and data demands. I think that pretty much every company is looking for data people. They're looking for data engineers or data warehouse resources. And there's such a large shortage in the market. And it almost begs us to wonder, why is that? Why are we not able to keep up with the demands from the business and actually be able to transform data in a way that's as efficient as some of these other parts of analytics? And so from a high level, I would say that that's a really clear indicator that there's efficiency gains and productivity gains that need to be made. I think to take it a little bit more granular, it depends on things like data architecture or applying standards and practices to actually transforming data or proper documentation and lineage. Like there's so many factors that come out of why it takes so long, why it's such a big bottleneck in the analytics landscape.
Yeah, it's interesting watching the cloud, I'll call it the CloudMPP space. You had Redshift come out. It was just this like huge sea change. Like suddenly you didn't have to sign a multi-million-dollar contract to have one of these systems. Then Snowflake, BigQuery. But it turned out that like just managing the human labor of managing transformations was still a huge headache. And that problem was not solved by these new tools. Like they were kind of miraculous, but still someone had to write the SQL, someone had to manage lineage. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You saw it. With the emergence of these incredibly powerful platforms like Snowflake, it's an insanely good platform, but there are so many other aspects of the analytics landscape that really required their customers to go find point solutions for. And so it turned into this best of breed, broad approach where you've got different tools for each section. Whereas historically, we saw this as well happen, but then there's a consolidation event where companies have those point solutions all in-house, like an Oracle or an SAP. So you don't need to go anywhere else. And ultimately, it's really great for the market because it drives innovation in each sector. And that's what we're really excited about doing for the data transformation space specifically, especially because we felt that was the area that has been the most time intensive, has been the most expensive, has led to the highest failure rates when you think about doing any type of data project.
Yeah. Speaking of the data platforms, these are incredible compute platforms they have. And Armon and I, we were in a discussion at one point showing with one of the VCs, and Snowflake came up, and he said, Snowflake has solved the data warehousing problem. So what are you guys building here? So there's a misunderstanding that the platform itself would, although it provides you the compute, but it not necessarily give you any productivity in building the actual data analytics, the artifacts, the tables, the logic that you need.
Yeah, it's all the logic, right? I mean, the logic's pretty vast. I mean, I'm looking around. I got books on data modeling. This is, the classic. Yeah, one of them for sure.
Yeah.
And it's also like 400 something pages long. So you can obviously there's a lot of examples in the book. The whole point is the tools are one thing. But then the practice of transformations is another, and I think Bill Emmons fond of saying, it's the transformations where you start getting the value out of your data.
Yep.
Too, right? And so it is the hardest part, but I'd say it's the most valuable part. So imagine a world without transformations, for example. What do you think happens?
I think we've seen it kind of happen, right? There's been scenarios where people just land the data in a platform and then they run off and try to drive analytics off it, do business intelligence, use BI dashboards, and then it leads to a huge lack of governance and a bunch of other problems where you've got one question that leads to 5 different answers and people off in silos. I mean, a lot of this still prevails today, to be honest, but it just leads to that problem more and more if there isn't proper transformations applied, rules applied to that data.
Yeah. I think we've typically seen 2 main scenarios. So one is that a company is migrating from an existing solution, is that they have a whole ETL team, right? They have these highly trained practitioners who can build out complex scripts. And so they just kind of lift and shift what they have to the new platform. The other possibility is that you have these small teams where suddenly it's like, hey, I'm a startup, but I can still use Snowflake or I can still use BigQuery or whatever. But then, like you're saying, Armon, they go in and they don't know what they're doing with transformations. They have the tool, but they're not seeing the value, or they're having to rebuild transformations for every use case because there's no generalization, there's no notion of normalization, anything like this.
Yeah.
And as Kent says here, what's up, Kent?
Yes.
Data swamp is a result. So, yeah. Maybe we'll just start a data swamp as a service company or something.
Yeah.
So it happens a ton. Swamps galore. So.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I would say that we've seen so many organizations that start off with a small analytics practice, don't really think about data architecture or proper data model prior to building. They just want to get analytics done quickly. And then as that business grows and grows, and as the data grows and the demands grow, they realize a year, 2 years, or 3 years down the road that they need to basically re-architect what they built. And that whole process is super painful. It's very expensive. It's very difficult to re-engineer for a lot of the reasons that you discussed as well.
That's real interesting. Actually, George Fiorkin has a question. Good morning, George. And I kind of asked him also, does this apply for analytics or ML? But his question is, what types of data transformation do you feel will come more in demand? Data smoothing, discretization, normalization, et cetera. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it's a combination of those things, right? I mean, data, it depends on how you want to use that data to solve a business problem. It really depends how the organization is trying to do that, get value out of that data. And every organization is different. Every data set is different. The normalization part is important because that's how you get some understanding of the data, how the quality of the data goes up once you understand and you kind of standardize it. That helps, and then the data smoothing and the data discretization depends on the use case. So if you have data science use cases, maybe you have to smoothen the data or you have to do certain things to it to prepare it. So I personally think all of those are pretty important. I don't know if one would be more important than the other. That's my personal take.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think Matt and I have the opinion. The answer is it really depends. So I think it's all the above. Yeah, I guess it's not like one data modeling technique to rule them all. So it's, unnormalized data, denormalized data is also a thing too. So I think that has a use case in some places. So it just depends. I don't know, what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you guys this, what's your opinion on the shift to this new generation of data systems? Is there a change in approaches to normalization versus denormalization into data modeling? I think what we've seen is that the vendors, if you talk to the vendors, they're like, yeah, denormalize, but they don't tell you what that really means. I think full denormalization is kind of meaningless. It's kind of like you're defining something by what it's not, but not by what it is. And true full denormalization creates a huge mess. On the other hand, even in the kind of more traditional data warehouse era, fully normalizing things was kind of a mess as well. So where do we land in between those two extremes? Do you guys have kind of an opinion on that when you work with customers? These are very open-ended questions, but more want to start a conversation on this.
Satish, what do you think? I'll let you take this one to start.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And see, I did a lot of data modeling. That was when I was doing data warehouses. That was the thing. Like, you have to focus on the architecture. You have to focus on the data models, get your data model right. Now, I've also seen the extreme of that. That's where the problem is. For some reason, the industry always works in extremes for some reason. Either you do all modeling or you just stop modeling and do nothing about modeling, and then you go the other side. So I think the problem is that, like, if you get the right balance, I think there's value in data modeling. There's value in normalization. And what you need to understand as an experienced architect or an experienced data engineer is you take a look at what you have at hand. What is the problem that I'm trying to solve? And how important is this data? Not all data are equal in an organization. There's critical data, there's data that just lifespan is short. You just have to build something very quickly. So there's all these different kinds of data. So you as a senior architect or engineer need to understand, like, do I normalize this data set? Am I using this data as my foundation? Is this the guts of the organization? So if so, then you have to apply extra care to it, which means you need to understand it. You need to draw those relationships. You need to kind of make sure that it's all aligns with the business needs and so on. And then if you're saying, I'm going to use this data over and over, I'm going to apply all that rules and prepare it and use it as a foundation. Now there's the other extreme is if the data is short-lived, it's got it becomes stale if you don't use it soon. That's different. You don't have to do it. You can take shortcuts because your goal is to get the value out of that before it expires.
So how do you balance, because I think there's a lot of ceremony too with data modeling to a large extent. So, I mean, how do you balance ceremony with practicality?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, it's all about focus on the outcome. People lose that. They don't focus on the outcome, the value that you get. They're focused mostly on the perfecting the model itself. That's where the problem is.
It's a balance, right? I mean, I feel like we come across this all the time dealing with customers and prospects. And like Satish said, I'm always fascinated by seeing how market trends really do feel like a pendulum swinging all the way to one side of an extreme and then all the way back to another side of an extreme. And I think that as the market develops, as people recognize that, hey, if we go way too deep on the modeling side of the house, there's going to be a little bit of analysis paralysis. If we go way too deep on just build things and try to get value out of it as quickly as possible, we're probably going to have to re-engineer this down the road. And so as people feel that pain, as people get burned, I feel like naturally there's going to be a happy medium, or at least I like to think there'll be some moderation applied where there's a nice ratio of the team that's focused on maybe modeling plus building, depending on the scale of the project, and the market just continues to evolve in a positive direction. But it does feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards.
Where do you think we are on the pendulum right now?
I would like to think that right now we're coming back from one side of the extremes where we've seen as the market growth hit with Snowflake and it gave access to people to do data that historically didn't have access to do it, and really didn't apply some of the best practices for data modeling and architecture. So we're coming back down to some type of moderation on where people have gone through the process of building a data warehouse or data project over the course of a couple of years and realizing now, oh, data architecture does matter. Oh, like that's why you model data. Yeah. And so we're starting to feel that type of experience, especially for some of the early adopters with these cloud platforms, where they're now recognizing that. You've seen that. I've seen whispers of that, even on social media, as some of these thought leaders have been posting, where they're now thinking about ER diagrams or doing modeling. Whereas if you talked to them about that 2 years ago, they would have laughed in your face. Like, why the hell do we need one of those? And so I like to see those types of things as some triggers and anecdotes where we are going to a lot closer towards moderation, but we still got a ways to go. I'd say a little bit of ways to go.
Yeah. And I think part of what we need here is maybe some notions of normalization that go beyond, the sacrosanct COD model of normalization, to be quite frank. I think part of the reason that first normal form doesn't allow any nesting is that relational databases back in the day didn't really handle that very well. And modern databases, they love nesting. And so it's well, maybe we should just kind of think about where it makes sense to do nesting and where it doesn't make sense. And I think you almost need a new set of common sense principles to think about what kind of data model makes sense and sort of start over on the normalization from a new perspective. So anyway, I'm sure that's going to raise some hackles too.
Yeah, so that's Matt. You can
that's right. You
address their
direct your fire
tomatoes at him.
So,
No, but we're talking a lot about this though, Matt. I think there is. It's weird. There haven't really been any new modeling techniques in the last 20, maybe 30 years. I mean,
Right.
I'd love to know what those are if we've seen them, but I haven't seen them. So, I think the latest, the big one, or the last big one was was Data Vault. Right?
Yeah,
that was that's cool. What do you guys see out there? Do you see is Data Vault implemented quite a bit stateside?
definitely feels like a growing market for sure. I mean, we do encounter quite a few different Data Vault organizations or organizations that aspire to build a enterprise Data Vault 2.0. Now that could be partially because of our past lives. I think we were largely involved with a lot of that growth at our previous organization. But at the same time, we're seeing that just mass adoption for cloud platforms and data warehousing. And I think Data Vault 2.0 does make a lot of sense for specific industries, specific use cases. And again, it really just comes down to what is the use case at the end of the day. But we've also seen, hybrid approaches like raw vaults with, kind of info marts or star schemas on them, kind of skipping over the business vault layer. I don't know. What do you think, Satish, from that whole perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have seen a growth in this space, especially the Data Vault, if it applies to the use case, as Armon was pointing out. If people say, "Hey, I want full auditability," Data Vault by design is allowing you to do that. So you have that. So it depends on the requirement. If compliance is the biggest thing for you, then it's a no-brainer. If you have a lot of sources coming in, very large number of data sources coming in, and the landscape in your organization for data is changing so fast. How do you keep up with that? Data Vault is definitely one way to ingest data and organize it in a way that you can query that. So yeah, absolutely, we are seeing Data Vault adoption, and sometimes I also wonder, some people just do Data Vault for the sake of it.
Well, tell me more about that. That sounds like a lot of work.
It does. So you got to be very careful. Why are you doing Data Vault? You have to actually question yourself. Am I doing Data Vault, because of this and this reasons? And I have read through that process before you decide on that, because it does add an additional layer and a learning. You have to understand how these need to be built. It's also very, very important that you understand the business needs there, so that the model is kind of reflecting that. Business and operations. That's very important.
I mean, I see people. It's in a sense, it's a really good thing. People aspire to build a Data Vault 2.0. They want to, they want to learn that process is a cutting edge methodology and model. And so it all comes back to the conversation we were having just a second ago, where it's important to be thinking about the use case, working with the business, and then of course having that moderation around modeling versus actually building and focusing on what's going to get to value for the business. Why are we really here? What are we trying to accomplish with data? But I would say that it can be easy to get lost just in general in the world of data for some of these kind of business outcome expectations. And if you add another layer of complexity with Data Vault 2.0, it's just important to keep that in mind. But we've seen it be incredibly successful at some massively large organizations. And one other use case we've encountered it firsthand is in the mergers and acquisitions. Like if a company feels innovative, that has been a huge use case that it makes a lot of sense for. Some of the companies we work with have been very acquisitive, and so naturally it made a lot of sense to support that.
Wait, so tell me more about that. Is that so you don't lose, so you can't go to an insert only strategy, or you're combining multiple businesses? Is it for auditing purposes? Like, what's the big driver in the M&A space to go with something like Data Vault?
Yeah, it's a combination of those things, man. First thing it allows, and if you go into a little bit detail of how a Data Vault model is arranged, you have this primarily like a hub table that holds the business key. And then you have satellites that hold the context of that business key around that hub. So if you get additional context of a business key from a different organization that you just acquired, that can be just hooked up as a satellite without touching any of the existing tables. And you just load those business keys into the hub, and then you have an additional satellite. So the ingest only pattern there will help you a lot because you're not touching anything existing. It's very contained, the change. So you don't have to do a lot of regression testing or a lot of engineering effort. So it really brings those data sources together very quickly. Of course, the quality and all of the other things, they're still there. It's not something like, it doesn't automatically integrate the data. You still have to find out if there's duplicate business keys that mean the same, and all of that work is still there. But there are solutions for that as well, like from a modeling standpoint in Data Vault. But to answer your point, it does help in all those areas. Ingestion, reduce engineering effort, re-engineering effort, especially when you have already an existing model. Things like that. It's pretty resilient.
Yeah. Kind of switching gears a bit. We're kind of in this, this spot right now in the data tooling world where transformation tools are either code-based or it's like everything is code or GUI-based, but not a lot in between. We kind of talked about extremes here. I think these kind of represent two extremes where if you're using certain tools, it's everything's code, or just drag and drop everything on the other extreme. But you guys, I think, kind of take a different approach. You want to walk us through that? Because I think it was actually a pretty interesting insight that you had.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, we've seen the market evolve in so many different ways where that pendulum has swung to both sides of extremes, both as well in the tooling side of the house. So we've seen technologies that have historically been very GUI driven and propose some type of efficiency for interacting with that GUI. And then subsequently people who realize that as soon as they need to go outside of the parameters of that interface, it's very painful. And you're writing custom scripts, whatever language it may be in, you're writing custom scripts, and it almost makes you ask, why am I even working within this framework? It's so rigid. And so we've seen people feel very burned by that type of tooling and go all the way to the other side of the extreme, which is this whole everything is code programmatic approach movement, where sure, you don't have that GUI, but at least you have the flexibility. You feel you have the flexibility to do whatever it is that you'd like. At the end of the day, both sides, to go too far on the extreme, are wrong. And the reason why is because with the GUI side of the house, that for what you gain in efficiency from that ease of use and intuitive nature, you compromise with flexibility. On the flip side, what you gain in flexibility by not using the GUI, you compromise in efficiency. And so when we set out on building Coalesce from the ground up, we were focused on giving you all the flexibility of code, but the efficiency of a GUI, efficiency of that intuitive ease of use nature without compromising any of the flexibility of your actual platform, in this case, Snowflake. And so we've seen people do wonderful things with being able to package up what we call nodes in a graph concept, where you can really get all the efficiency of a traditional GUI without sacrificing any of the flexibility that people are used to or that people desire, especially at this day and age where data has become more and more complex. You want to do more interesting things to it. You've got so many nuances and edge cases, and being able to provide a platform, a technology that's guaranteed to support everything that you'd want to do is where we really saw our focus with that whole moderation concept. Again, give you the best of both worlds.
That's really interesting. I mean, you had some nodes as well. Are those the same as recipes? Because I remember when you showed me the product, I was like, this is pretty cool. I could do basically do data vault in here. You said like,
yeah,
everything was there. It could turn into a satellite hub or link or whatever. That's pretty cool. So
yeah, I mean, we've seen that the nodes concept, and Satish, it'd be nice to share just from a high level how that's packaged. But basically, it's you're given the ability to effectively code your own GUI, code your own package of what is basically a table. And we've seen people do all types of stuff. We've seen people support Data Vault, like you mentioned, Joe, also do streams and tasks on Snowflake, for example, as a big use case, and then take it into all different types of scenarios, whether it's pivot tables or deduplication or profiling data, all within the SQL pipeline as you build. And the way we were able to accomplish that, I think, is pretty interesting. That we haven't really seen any other technology do. Satish, you want to dive into that from the whole abstraction of DDL and DML and being able to package those configurations and write them into the interface?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have a pattern that you recognize that, hey, this pattern is going to be used in my organization, then this is the best way to package in our opinion, because a node is a package that has, the configuration, which is basically what the data engineer can, how they can configure, and the logic that is needed to first create that object on Snowflake, however you want to materialize that. And the third piece is finally the processing logic itself. Like if it is a table, and how am I processing it? Like what kind of principles am I applying while loading the data into this? For example, am I creating a hash key as a surrogate key? Am I creating some system columns to track audit values? Am I doing some specific transformations that are needed? So all of those can be packaged up. And as an architect, you can create these nodes and then kind of have everybody else on the team just use it to build their pipelines. And that's how you get the speed. You don't need everybody to be an architect. You don't need everybody to understand the whole thing. But you still get a lot of productivity.
Interesting. What do you think the bottlenecks are in data teams when it comes to transformations and tooling?
I would say there's a few things. I mean, first of all, today, just finding a data engineer is hard.
Yeah.
Start there.
By the way, if you're looking for data engineers, you should hit us up. We've somehow become a recruiting company now. So anyway, continue, Satish.
Yeah. So that's definitely a number one issue. And then, once you get into the field, we talk about skills in terms of tools and things like that. That's always there, but that's not the biggest issue. I think somebody who understands, the business well and focus on the outcome, again, not getting bogged down into the details and not able to understand whether these are needed or not. That kind of skill, I think that's rare, in my opinion. We're not seeing people are like there either to jump on something and I want to learn this, but they miss the point that, hey, it's not about to learn. You will learn, but you have to actually focus on what you're doing. Like what's the outcome and what the business want. You start there and solve that problem or try to solve that problem. And as a result, you will learn. As opposed to just, I want to perfect this because I'm going to be an expert in this. It's all about inward looking. And that's the problem, Yeah.
It seems it's always been the problem too.
Yeah.
Since I've been in data, and probably longer. I'm sure maybe somebody can't chime in on this because he's an OG. but it definitely seems like the business value has been something that just sort of, yeah, I'll take care of that later. I want to focus on whatever tool or whatever technique you're using. So
I do feel that it's getting closer and closer to being interactive with the business as the market progresses as well, because we're getting to the point where we have the opportunity to give access to data to pretty much everybody. It's just a matter of being able to work more closely and more efficiently and more quickly. And the business is starting to expect things in a way. And we're able to accomplish that, from a data engineering perspective, a lot faster, at least a lot more efficiently. And you're starting to see things become a lot more collaborative from a data perspective, where you see citizen data roles in each department, people who actually understand the business rules that can extend off of the framework or the data architecture that the IT guild has built, and then being able to kind of self-serve themselves into their analytics for their specific use cases, which is really exciting. I would say that's the best thing that can happen to this market, is being able to do these things together and collaboratively throughout the enterprise.
Yeah, we are big fans of data mesh.
Yeah.
You would like the show that we did on Friday then.
Yes.
Shout out to Zhamak for being on the Friday show as well. That was a lot of fun chatting with her about the lesser known aspects or the less discussed aspects of data mesh, I would say. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, data mesh I think has a lot of potential to change a lot of things, just like microservices did back in the day with software. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, inherently, I assume that data mesh is going to imply less normalization. Hopefully, there's still modeling, but like you're going to have less global normalization across the company. In our chat with Bill Inman, his opinion was that maybe data mesh should coexist with the traditional approach to data. So each of these teams kind of owns their data, but you might still have some notion of a data warehouse that is Data Vault or some other normalization and modeling approach that kind of gathers all the data together. Well,
the thing we need is data interop, right? Can we talk about systems interoperability quite a bit? But I think there is a new, maybe some room for data model interoperability or something like that. I think that's data mesh definitely, I think, opens the door for that. But I think it seems like, as far as my research goes, very unexplored. Because it just hasn't come up. Everything's been in a silo. So why would you need interop? But I think increasingly, data sharing initiatives and data marketplaces are also a big step towards this. But I think we're only at the very beginning of that. So
Inman he published a good blog piece on the data warehouse in general and how it's been basically a whack-a-mole game.
Oh, the data warehouse, rest in peace. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. I read that. I was like, what the hell? It was great. I read the article and I felt, I strongly agree with that, with what he was saying, which is basically people have tried to kill the data warehouse so many times. We used to hear the data warehouse is dead, but to even have a successful data mesh, the foundational piece would be to have some type of central repository data warehouse that you can extend off of and provide to other users in the businesses or other users in different departments and extend off and build products to those specific teams. Otherwise, it seems like it get really messy really quick.
Well, it could. I think a lot of it depends on Conway's law too. How's your org structure to begin with, right? And so I think for a lot of companies, a data warehouse is good enough for most cases. It's like,
for sure,
as we say, most companies are barely doing BI, let alone AI. Like it's still the case that BI is just, it is what it is. Like, I think there's a lot of cargo cult BI, but that's not the same as like getting real intelligence out of it. And Kent has a good point here. He says, agile principles call for daily interactions with the business. Data mesh requires it if you're going to have domain-based data teams, which is absolutely correct. And so, daily interactions like the key. If you ain't doing that, it's just you're basically just a report mill.
So. How do you guys feel? Do you feel that we're getting closer to a more interactive ecosystem and environment? Is analytics progressing in that direction?
It's interesting. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about this. We hope analytics is progressing in that direction. I think some organizations are doing it. I don't know globally how the progress is going. And I would say there are two places actually where you need interaction. So you need analytics to interact with the business, but you also need more interaction between analytics and the app side, which maybe we can dig into more later. Joe and I have been thinking about this part quite a bit.
Yeah. I should get to Mark's question here real quick.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's kind of related. How does a company improve the understanding of the business value objective for data engineering and analysts? Does this come down to leadership making sure that everyone understands the business and its objectives? It's somewhat of a related question. So what do you guys think?
Before Satish gets into the technical piece,
Yeah.
I think a really easy question. I think a really easy question to ask in these scenarios is, what happens if we don't do it? What happens if we don't do this project or this use case? How does it affect the business? What's the actual objective? What are we trying to accomplish? And by asking, what if we don't do this? I think it really quickly will lead into exactly why you're about to do it and get you some type of clear understanding.
That's my favorite question to ask companies too, is what happens if we just do nothing?
Yeah. What's the impact?
In a lot of cases too, it's like, I guess nothing happens. And I'm like, cool, then I guess
And
you don't need to do anything. Yeah, just saved you a bunch of time and money. Here's the bill.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts, Satish?
Yeah, this has been there forever. I mean, this is it's an organizational, like a cultural thing. I mean, I can just take my personal approach that I did when I was working, at a financial firm. I was trying to find, I mean, because I was in the central team, I was an IT person, playing like a role as a bridge, between IT and business. My thing was to find the right people in the business. But that comes from IT. In this case, we are saying, how does the organization improve that? So what I did was I tried to find partners in business, right people who are, technical enough, but they know and excited about doing something for the organization, and they are excited to learn the technology, but they're not experts. But they know the business, and they have something in it for them. And those partnerships, when I created those partnerships with the right people, I had tremendous amount of success. Now, as an organization, they have to find out who those partners are going to be on the technical side and on the business side, and then pair them up and say, hey, these are the partners. These are the people who should drive this. And I think that's what I would do, because I was the person on the other side, on the technology side, and there was a few people on the business side where I partnered and had great success. And I would say that should be the focus. How you create those, because at the end of the day, it's about people. That's what it is. And no matter how many tools you do, how much training you provide, if it is not within them to solve this, it is impossible.
You would say too, right, that as you go through all these different processes, it's not always super clear what the project will actually lead to from a value perspective. And that's one of the great things about data, is that as you drive some insight out of it, one question leads to an answer that leads to 5 more questions. And you see data evolve into almost this domino effect where you actually are able to get value out of that data in ways that you didn't think were imaginable prior. And so I think just finding an initial use case that almost might be low-hanging fruit, or a very obvious one, or a very clear one, will naturally lead into a snowball effect of different types of projects and different success for the business.
Well, also by interacting with the business too, and understanding who the stakeholders are and developing a rapport with them and relationship. I think that means you're going to be successful too, because what their outcomes are, what they need. Maybe you'll become friends with them too, and that goes a long way. I think social capital can't be understated enough. I think that's like the one thing that's totally underrated, and it always has been in technology and data, is just being able to be effective, socially and politically, to be crass, but it's true. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being able to bridge that gap is so key. One of the big reasons why we took the approach we did was so we could fit both audiences, within the organization, the power user on the business side, plus the most techie data architect that the business has. Because everybody should be collaborating at the end of the day. They should be working in, a similar type of framework, so that way you're all unified.
Yeah, not reinventing the wheel either, right? It's like when I saw what you guys had, I was like, this is cool, because I don't have to, rewrite a slowly changing dimension for the 50,000th time. It's like, it's just sort of there, and
Yeah.
that's how it should be, right? So, you have something to say, Matt?
Oh, I was just going to throw in as well. I mean, what about this problem of customer-facing analytics? I think traditionally what's happened in the data warehousing space is that the data warehouse team tends to serve the business, and so there's less focus on going back toward the application and saying, hey, why don't we embed some of this data right into the application and point it to customers as well? I mean, how can teams do a better job of kind of facing in both directions, both being integrated with the app and serving the business well?
Or are we talking about reverse ETL here?
Not necessarily. Well, more like if I want so I have dashboards for my business, but what about if I'm building a SaaS platform and I also want to have dashboards that my customers can directly see?
Yeah, like sort of embedded analytics, maybe is what
Yeah,
it's called.
embedded.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, I had that need when I was working on
yeah,
embedded analytics was like the biggest thing, because we were building customer-facing applications, and we wanted to embed the right, charts or whatever analytics into the app, into the web portal. This is for external customers. I mean, the challenge that I had with that was purely technical. Like at that time, the technical solution was not there, easily available. Things have come a long way now, like with Power BI and Click and Tableau. They support those embedded analytics today pretty easily, but back then it was very hard to do that. I was looking at open source solutions to do something like that. So my experience was mainly technical challenges. Other than that, I think once you have a centralized place where you have curated data and analytics, I mean, then it becomes just a technology thing, how you distribute that and how you kind of integrate that with other, whether it's a SaaS application or some other application, it doesn't matter that much.
Once you do that whole easy thing of the centralized repository, that's perfectly governed. Once you just get past that part, then it's all downhill.
It's like a cooking show. So
yeah,
that's interesting. Where do you see the data space going over the next few years? This is a question we like to ask all of our guests. Always endlessly curious on this one.
I'll let Satish go first.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, one of the things, as you put correctly, which is, BI, we still, a lot of companies are doing BI, let alone AI. So there's a lot of room there to catch up, I guess, for a lot of organizations. Real time is one big thing that, people have been saying for a long time, but I don't think everybody's doing it. There's a lot of companies are still not there. They're still trying to find use cases. Do we even have a use case, for that? So real time is one area. Flexible models, kind of resilient models is another one. Like Data Vault is a good example, right? I mean, that's another area. No, decentralization, the data mesh. That's another area. But yeah, those are the few areas that I'm thinking. Transformations definitely is going to play a huge role in all of this data transformations, right? I mean, whether you're getting unstructured data, structured data, whatever you're doing, you have to clean the data, you have to curate the data, you have to transform the data.
I kind of felt like, so Satish and I, when we started Coalesce, we were in stealth mode for quite some time, at least over a year, almost a year and a half. And while we were in stealth, we weren't interacting with a ton of companies, just out of the nature of being stealth. And coming out of it, I think it was very surprising to find that as we talked to all these large enterprises and these organizations that had even been on Snowflake for years, still the vast majority of their workloads living on premise and living on their old enterprise relational database on premise. And I think that whole movement still has yet to happen, actually shifting off the EDW that's living in Exadata or Teradata. There's certainly been some great examples of this executed well by Snowflake, but I think the market opportunity and like the the migrations, the great migrations have really yet to happen. And that's going to be a really imminent piece that we're seeing firsthand, where companies say use Snowflake for a department specific use case, love it. And now we're trying to think and try to figure out how to digest that EDW migration or whatever the use case would be for these massive workloads on premise. And I would think that some of these ambitious things, in the future that we're talking about, that this will probably be or required to be done first before being able to successfully execute on some of these other, ambitious hot topics that we discussed.
For sure. Like, I think your biggest competition isn't maybe DBT or any of these other tools. It's SSIS.
Yeah, that's right.
It's true.
Control M and I mean, what are the big challenges if a company is trying to migrate from an on-prem system to just say, let's move everything to Snowflake? What's going to be their number one challenge in trying to undertake that process?
I think it's a tough pill to swallow, first and foremost. It's viewed in a way as a sunk cost potentially from the business perspective, where it's oh, geez, we're going to have to shift this off and that's going to take us years to do. Is it really, like, do we really have to do that right now? Or can we do some other stuff in the meantime? And people in teams, they will also procrastinate doing so. And so I think the speed at which people can migrate is so important. And being able to unlock productivity gains for migrations is so key. And it's been one of the sectors that we've seen Coalesce be very successful in, is just migrations in general, whether it's off of SSIS or some other traditional ETL tool, depending on the platform, right? Whether it's SQL Server, Teradata, Exadata, whatever it may be. But, having to go through, understand what was built, and then decide if you want to redesign or re-architect, that's a whole nother question from migrating. Is it just a lift and shift? You hardly ever want to do that, because what was probably built on premise isn't what you want in the cloud. So you're going to have to start going through this entire re-architecture, design review on what you want to build next. That takes a lot of time. And then actually going to build it, of course, traditionally has been very time-consuming, expensive effort.
And learning a new platform now, because now you have to do that and make it optimized for that new platform.
Well, yeah, the paradox is if you don't migrate, you're just embedding yourself more in these workloads that are probably very complicated. And so it actually increases the risk that you'll never leave, precisely because it's complicated.
Of course.
We see this often.
It does take that strong leadership, right, to kind of put the foot down and say, hey, we're doing this. We're going off, because, like you said, the longer that goes on, the more entrenched you are on premise. So
yeah,
scary.
It doesn't get better with time. It does not get better with time. It's like a smelly dumpster or something. It's not like it gets more pleasing over time. So, not saying people's data stacks are just like that, but
sometimes
some are actually, and that's true.
Clear.
Like dumpsters that are on fire
and also smelly. Yeah.
Tell me more, Matt.
We have lots of data trauma here.
I do feel that we're seeing a lot of movement, though. A lot of organizations that are they do now desire to shift off their on-premise workloads to the cloud. Whereas, we were working with Snowflake probably before there were 100 employees in our past lives as well. And that company's had amazing growth. We love Snowflake. It's the only platform we support for that reason. And now we're seeing organizations really, really start to think, how do we actually shift our entire on-premise workloads, which is great. I think it's perfect timing. Platform super mature, support all these enterprise scale use cases. But it does feel like we're just at the cusp of it. Really, we're at the tip of the iceberg. It has not been a large focus from the Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 until recently, I would say.
Yeah, and it's hard because it kind of goes against the traditional value system of cloud platforms, because you can't be fully agile. In other words, you're talking more of a moonshot. Like you have to commit, and you have to spend a bunch of money and resources and just get it done so you can shut down the old system. It's not like you can gradually migrate over 10 years. It doesn't really work that way to have two centers of gravity like that at the same time.
Oh, no, one of our clients, I mean, we were meeting with the CIO the other day, and he said, yeah, a migration that was supposed to take a couple of years, their investor said, look, you need to get this done by the end of the year. So you got, let's see, 8 months,
Hey,
7
tell
months to
me
get this
all
done.
us, Joe.
We're talking like everything has to be out of the data center and into the cloud. Yeah, everything. And this is, But you know what? Deadlines work. I mean, no better way to get something done than knowing you got to get it done by. I do this with my kids all the time.
Yeah, that's what makes diamonds. Let's go.
Talked about streaming, Satish. What's your thoughts on data modeling with streams?
Data modeling with streams. So one of the things, like for example, data vault is, because it's ingestion only, it's a nice model that fits that pattern, because you're getting the data, you're not doing any updates, and the stream data can be just ingested into that. So it's a nice fit there, right there, for that. As far as the streaming data itself goes, first of all, you can't transform the data much. You have these stream sets kind of tools that will let you do some ETL on the streaming data. But mostly the way that I see stream data is mostly like a fact table data, right? So it's mostly ingestion. It's like a transaction that you're going to analyze in the context of other information, such as your dimensional data. So the way that I see it is, stream data usually lands in a fact table, and everything else is like just you're analyzing it around in the context of the other dimensions, which are built either star schema or whatever methodology that you adopt.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we asked this a lot of people. I don't think Matt or I have an opinion yet either, but it's something we've been in our minds lately. Because again, like there haven't been any real transformations in the transformation space for a long time. No pun intended, but it's no big ideas. But with the world moving towards streaming, we're kind of like, okay, so like when are we going to see, sort of the next evolution of data modeling, but on streams? And don't know yet. Don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Some people will tell you don't even bother doing it. Just assume the data contract with the upstream source is correct and land your data and do your thing. And I think that's that's sort of the default answer right now.
Yeah, and it implies a lot of assumptions. It implies there even is a data contract with upstream. And I think anyone who's worked with that kind of source data coming from an application knows that often it changes without notice unless you have a really good communication pattern with the data provider.
Yep,
that's true. So it may not fit anywhere. Like,
are you guys seeing streaming use cases pop up more and more?
More and more. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially for like fast analytics. So I think there's two aspects to this. One is like using streams, and then two is low latency ingest and low latency queries as a result for like embedded analytics, especially, and other types of use cases like that. But yeah, we're seeing a lot more of that.
That's cool. I mean, we're definitely seeing the, closer and closer to real time, like the change data capture, CDC, streams and tasks use cases are growing a lot. But like full streaming, I feel like it's still a little bit ways to get exactly there versus what I would say is still pretty damn close,
Yeah, I think the tooling is getting better, right? So companies like Moroxa, for example, and I think others are kind of on the cutting edge of making the tooling for streaming pipelines just a lot simpler. I mean, because back in the day, you got to set up your own Kafka or Flink processing or Beam or whatever. And it's just, cloud providers do provide this now, but it's still like, you got to know what you're doing. You really have to know what you're doing with this stuff. It's not just kind of, I don't know. These are very powerful tools.
Right. So, but they're like historically were difficult to set up and support. Whereas
even stuff like Kinesis, like that's managed pretty much, but it's like you still got to know what you're doing with it, like unless you want to spend a lot of money accidentally. So,
and it's still, for the time being, the glue parts, just connecting together the different streams and building out more complex flows. That part is still hard, even though you have these managed services.
Yeah.
And I know various platforms are trying to solve this problem, but it seems like it's still early days in terms of having something that's more unified, where you don't have to think about, hey, how data is moving, and it becomes more like a data warehouse where you can just think about querying and transformations just inside that system.
Yep. I do like what you said, Joe. I mean, for specific use cases, like fast analytics, of course, it makes sense. I see a world in which they'll coexist, streaming use cases and historical data, data warehousing.
Yeah, in my perfect world, I mean, I would just have everything real time, right? Like, why do you need to wait? But then I guess it's also the question, like, what are you going to do with that if you get it? Like, what action are you going to take? Like, does it help you do smart things more quickly, or make you do dumb things more quickly? So, you don't want the latter. Like, doing dumb things very quickly is not ideal. So
and expensively as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Unless you learn from that. Like,
from those historical.
You're asking for a lot, Satish. Come on.
It's very optimistic. Yeah.
That's a good point, though. You do need to learn from it. But yeah, it's an interesting one. And we're seeing, I think we're at an inflection point with the industry right now where, I don't know, it feels like there's definitely a sea change. New types of databases coming out. Like your Firebolts or Rocksets of the world imply and so forth. I mean, it's just a lot of these have been around for a while, actually, but it feels like they're just now getting the adoption for certain use cases. And again, like Snowflake ain't stupid. They're working on exactly this stuff, I'm sure. So it's like, they can rest and say, oh, everything must be batch. It's like nobody in the right mind's gonna, stick with that edict, in a world where I think the expectations are just moving more towards real time. So but
it's a ball. Analytics space feels like it moves so fast, and then at times, then it also feels like it moves so slow at other times.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. Like this book here, if you read the DevOps Handbook, this came out in like 2000. What was it? 2000. Well, this is 16, but I think DevOps itself came out a long time ago. Like in the 2000s, but it was. It's funny because you read a book like this and you basically just replace the word dev with data, and you pretty much have like all of the companies that are in existence right now in observability, for example, or reliability, or any of the stuff. So I think that you can just take inspiration from software engineering, and basically whatever software engineering has been doing, you're probably going to see something like that in the data world. So I think that's the litmus test Matt and I use is, okay, so like what hasn't been appropriated yet from software? Okay, then that probably will be at some point. Or some variant of that. Obviously, data and software are not exactly like the same thing, but close. So
I would bet we'll see an extreme approach of that as well, where we go too far on the appropriation side of software engineering. If we're not already seeing that, but there is going to be another balance of moderation on what lessons we do take from those best practices, and how we find that. Data ops applied in a really, really strong way, a really successful way.
That's such a great point. Cool. So we're at time right now. Thanks for being on the show. Love talking to you guys. For people who want to learn more about what you're up to, how can they do that?
Yeah, just go check out our website, coalesce.io. You see, we got a customer spotlight coming up next month.
Thanks.
Very, very efficient, from nothing, built from scratch, EDW into production very quickly. You can always reach out to either of us, request a demo, kick off a free trial, but we'd love to answer any questions. We're always here for everybody. So
yeah, that's cool.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great having you guys here.
Thanks,
and just for the audience, we're going to be skipping the Friday show this Friday, and the next Monday's Monday Morning Data Chat. So you get a break without us. Congratulations. I'm actually going to be visiting my grandmother in Omaha this week. So, and Matt and I, we just kind of need a break. We've been doing shows for, we do 2 shows a week now, which is kind of crazy. So it's like a job on top of a job, but it's a lot of fun. I think what we like about this, we get to talk to, highly smart people like yourselves, and this is just, a great audience, questions and so forth. So it's awesome. But yeah, so then we'll be back on the 9th. We have Arjun from Materialize on to talk about Materialize and what it does, and kind of these next gen databases, I think, like fast analytics again, which is, I think, really cool. So again, we're Ternary Data. If you want data architecture, data engineering consulting, hit us up at ternarydata.com. And we'll see you all on the 9th. So, cool. All right. See you guys. Thanks to the audience for the questions too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Take care.